Dave, how are you doing?
Hey, Swamini, I'm doing good, thank you. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm also good, thank you. I'm so glad that you could join this call today because I know we spoke a few months back and I was so mesmerized, I would say, after that call. I thought because I was at the receiving end and I did end up buying. I think the way you led the call that day, that really made a difference for me, the way I see how businesses work or how sales should be done. So I'm really glad that you could join in and we could discuss more in details about your process and a little bit about you. so, can,
Yeah, no, thanks for the kind words.
so can you please tell me about your background and what do you currently do?
Yeah, of course. So I'm kind of one of those people that probably got into the sales world a little bit later than most. So it wasn't like that was always my dream.
Yeah.
So I've tried lots of different things, basically any sort of 9 to 5 you can imagine I've been involved in. And then really, just had a tough time a few years ago and had to really reset everything and build myself back up. And I kind of found this world of sales, as it were, like in the online space. So what I do now is like I'm a remote sales rep. Is like what the term would really be. So I work from home or wherever I want, and I basically sell on behalf of other people. So at the moment, I'm kind of in a sales manager role with a business called Agency Profits, which is where we met.
Yeah.
And then that's what I kind of do basically full time at the moment. That's where my whole focus is. So yeah, so I'm the sales manager sales role there. And then obviously what we do is, we help people come on board and train them skills and kind of knowledge and processes on how to set up a business that they can run remotely as well. So that's kind of like where we are.
Yeah, that sounds good. So what do you love about the art of making a sale that you think that most people don't notice?
No, it's a good question. I think for me, it's the fact with sales, I think it was too long. Everybody probably still thinks as well. It's all about, they think, convincing someone and pushing someone. And because I get asked that a lot, how do you convince someone to buy? Well, you don't. that's not what we're here for. It's what I love about it is the coaching side of it and kind of changing people's lives. So for me, it's like, right, have we got something that can solve the problem that you're having? If we have, and it's in your best interest to do it, then let's figure this out together. And there's a lot of psychology, a lot of kind of behind the scenes, but that's the part that I really enjoy. It's not, oh, just how many sales can you make? It's not, what tactics can I make, and trick people. It's genuine authenticity of, let's help this person and let's see if it works for them. And if it doesn't, it's also good to go, that's not a good fit. Why don't you try something else? And I think for me, that's really what I love about the sales world, helping people and getting them over their fears in a way that benefits them.
Yeah, that's really good. So what's the difference between B2B and B2B sales? Because I know you talked about psychology. I feel that, different tricks might go into both of them.
Yeah, I think it's with B2B versus B2C. In my opinion, there's a few subtle changes, but it only really changes on a larger scale. So what I mean by that is B2C, obviously that's just like me to customer, and I'm helping them overcome, they're the decision maker. So we kind of deal with their fears or their worries and coach them through that. B2B, if you're still talking to the business owner or they're a smaller business and you're talking to the full decision maker, in my opinion, it's still technically B2C, because all we're doing, the problem may be slightly different, but it's probably still based around the same things, right? Money, time, value, all this. The only time I think it really changes, and I'm happy to be corrected by other people on this, but when you start going up to like enterprise level, where there's maybe a hierarchy and you're talking to someone, 3 or 4 levels below the decision maker, that's a different process, because yes, it's all about the emotions still and solving their problem, but there's a lot of red tape they have to go through. So the process will be longer. and we'll kind of have to deal with a lot more, kind of more paths. We'll solve that person's problem, and then we've got to make sure, if I'm selling software to a big organization, for example, it's also got to solve the next person up the ladder's problem, and then the next. So there's a few more kind of checkpoints you have to go through. But I think for the majority of people, business to business and business to customer is not too dissimilar, right? It's emotion, solving problems, and helping them get to their goal. So that's kind of my take on it. It's kind of like the bigger businesses that it kind of changes a bit there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you follow a framework. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. And like, how can someone master the art of selling? That would be like the bigger question.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, when you say framework, for me, that's key, right? There's a big debate in the sales world versus, exact scripts versus frameworks and all this. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of exact scripts because, can this exact phrase work every time with every person? And it becomes a bit difficult. So with frameworks, I much prefer to go this route because it's a bit more authentic, right? Because my framework or parts of my framework really is there's a couple of phrases a couple of phases to the call itself, right? So obviously if I'm doing sales with someone, there's a few key things we need to know. So we need to know what the problem is, right? It's a good place to start. So what problem is this person having? And why is that a problem? Or like, what impact is that problem having? Okay. So we can't move on to sell our product unless we know that first, right? Because if I'm trying to sell you, a silly example, but if I'm trying to sell you a beef steak and you're a vegan, then I've messed up somewhere. Right, so I need to know this first. So then the second part after that is we also want to know where they're trying to go. Like, what's the reason they want to fix this problem? When they do fix it, what does that get them? And this is key for people, and it's got to be done the right way. It's not manipulative. It's not trying to sell the dream as some people think. It's more going, well, again, helping people make a decision is hard. So they need to know why they're doing it, right? And they need to tell themselves. So we need to know that. And then really after that, there is an extra phase, which is key. It's hard to do right, but it's what I suppose would be called like the consequences of not making a change, right? And we need to know that as well, again, for the same reason that this person, if they're trying to make a huge decision, as soon as you say the price of something, that's all they're going to see, right? We're all the same. And we need to just get them to understand that, yes, there's a price involved with whatever you're selling. It doesn't matter. But if that price is outvalued by, what they're getting from it and what it's solving for them. So we need to give them that results thinking again and go, right, remember, this is what you wanted to fix, and kind of, going that route. So they're the main kind of points. There's obviously nuances around it, but if you kind of make sure you're following those, that's key. So if you wouldn't mind, I can give a real quick example of like a real life, if that'd be useful. So if you were trying to sell fitness to somebody and go this route, now, there's a couple of ways you can go, right? You can sell the six-pack dream, right? Everyone wants a six-pack. So you can try and sell that and go, oh, I do a six-pack. But if you were talking to, maybe you wanted to niche down a little bit because that helps with your problems and you know how you help. So if you want to niche down a bit and you started to go, right, I'm going to work with middle-aged men who are in high-stress occupations, right? Like C-suite people. Suddenly, it's not about the six-pack anymore. It's knowing that in that demographic, a earlier case of heart attacks is very likely. So it's not that you're just trying to sell them a dream. It's like, look, if you've told me if you don't solve this, that's the path you're on. So we need to sort this out. And that's kind of what we're looking at. So it's not just trying to sell what you think is good. It's trying to sell what is actually helpful to the person you're talking to. So hopefully it's obviously just a little example, but I hope that helps get the point across.
Yeah, of course. It was really helpful. And especially like when you put things in example, it just helps to, like envision like what the situation might be and how one can approach it. So I don't want to get into like proper numbers, but to just say briefly about how have you helped businesses like reach at what level with your sales techniques?
Yeah, of course. So basically, I've been kind of doing this sort of stuff for just over a year now. So I started like last year, the very beginning of last year. And then I kind of came alongside Agency Profits, which is a company I spoke about earlier, around March last year, that sort of time. And I mean, it was a crazy journey because, you know, like I said, I'd never really done this sort of stuff before. And then within the first couple of months, we were already kind of hitting towards the seven figures sort of area. And, you know, kind of growing it that way. So I kind of, you know, there's a lot of mindset that goes on with sales, and I'm quite hard on myself. So sometimes I forget to look at, you know, what I've actually done. But yeah, kind of turning the business around and helping it grow to that sort of level. I mean, it was already doing well before, you know, I kind of came along and expedited it, I suppose. And then alongside that, the sales training and the sort of frameworks that I've developed since then have also helped people, you know, in your position who joined us to learn the skills.
Yeah.
And now seeing people regularly leaving their jobs and being able to do this and travel and do their own business, like that's really what's exciting about it.
Yeah, that's really good. And I know like you have talked about previously about some courses and all that you have done. So can you please tell me a little bit more about that? Like what courses or books do you recommend to other people?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, to be honest, I've done quite a lot. I threw myself into it, and I think for anyone trying to get into business or sales or anything like that, throwing yourself into stuff, make yourself uncomfortable is key, right? So I joined quite a few. I mean, some of the biggest trainers out there at the moment, you've got someone called Cole Gordon, and you've got someone else called Jeremy Miner. They're probably the two biggest sales trainers in the world at the moment in remote selling. Their courses I've done both. They're both really, really good. Both have a similar approach, but slightly different sort of like nuances to it all. I think they all kind of were trained under the same people at some point. So, you know, kind of follows the same idea. But yeah, I mean, anyone like that is really good to get under. Personally, as far as books go as well, there's a book called Gap Selling by a man called Keenan. And that's a really good, that's a bit more B2B, but you can really use it, you know, in any sale. It's the same thing. But I think for anyone looking to get into sales, you can obviously try all these training and coaching and go that route, which is, you know, invaluable. But personally, the biggest eye opener for me when I did all of these training courses, I suddenly realized the biggest change in sales recently has been, instead of features and benefits, you know, it's more like what I kind of touched on earlier. It actually follows the coaching frameworks that were developed in like the 80s and the 90s for actual coaching. And then they've actually just transferred that to a sales call. So it's really fascinating to see that, you know, so kind of looking up the coaching models as well as the training for sales is, you know, that's kind of what helped me go through it all.
Yeah. And I do feel that learning about something like theoretically and then, you know, all of those processes, like you can take courses, you can read books, and you can learn all of these techniques. But at some point when you are at the ground, you might face some failures. So how do you deal with failures as a salesperson? And especially when, let's say, you are 100% commission based?
Yeah, failures is a difficult one, and like you say, especially being 100% commission based, which I am, it's difficult. And I think there's a couple things I would say for people. One, mindset is huge, right? The same with everything, but your mindset. It's not like you can't accept you've had a failure. Like, yeah, you've got to admit, right, I messed up there, or I'm having a bit of a slump, or, you know, I'm struggling. But it's knowing that you can kind of come through the other side, right? And it's kind of pushing through. So I've had some months, you know, like I had one in particular where I think I made like 5 sales at like 13% closing, which for me is just like really low. When you're on 100% commission, that's a tough month to get through. So in those times, it is difficult. And really, some of the things that have helped me is outside of work, making sure you're taking care of yourself, you know, making sure you're looking after yourself, health, wellness, meditation, all that good stuff. It's really important to kind of keep yourself balanced, right? But then inside of work, one of the things I've found to be key is that sort of framework we were talking about, and having a process. if you follow the same process every time, this is where I kind of talk about frameworks and processes, not scripts, but if you follow that every time and you know that it's working because you've built it out and you've been selling really well for a couple of months, and then you suddenly have a bad month, if you stick to the same process and go, I know my process isn't broken because it's been doing well, I've just got to ride this out. And that, just doing that same thing and going, right, I'm just going to keep going and keep pushing because I know it's not broken. And so having something there that works and that you know is you're confident in, that helps you get through it as well. Because it's just like, right, I've just got to stick out, it'll turn around, because it's the same with everything. If you were, in the sales world, there's a lot called, like, a lot of people base their abilities on closing ratio, right? It's like an ego metric. But if you were even doing, like, just say 50% right in the middle, it doesn't mean that every 2 calls you sell one and you don't sell one. It could mean out of 10 calls, you do 5 and not make any sales, and then the next 5 you make all of them. So it's kind of like that 3 feet from gold analogy people say, like, just keep pushing, even when you feel that you're struggling. So that's kind of my take on it. And really, it's also just be kind to yourself, don't beat yourself up. And I love, like, psychology stuff. So for me, it's like, reevaluate what your meaning of the word failure means, right? Because people say, what if I fail? What if this doesn't work? Like, well, how do you know you failed? Like, you're just having a bad time. Like, you only fail, the cliches, you only fail when you give up. And I do think that's right. But you do also have to make sure your process is working. Like, if you've never closed anyone, you probably need, and you've been doing it a year, you probably need to fix something. But we're kind of talking about, if you have a slump or a bad time, you just got to keep pushing through. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, that definitely does. And I do feel that sales, because of all the psychology involved, I feel that sales has a science in itself. And, there is so much we can cover in this session. So do you have any final piece of advice, which maybe we haven't covered in one of my questions?
Yeah, I think really there's probably a couple pieces. The main one, though, is if someone's wanting to start something like this, first of all, sales as a career, it is quite exciting, right? And one of the good parts about it, which a lot of people probably don't realize, when you're selling, you only have to sell, right? The fulfillment of what you're selling is taken care of by someone else, right? So all you have to do is do the selling, and you can make as much as you want to in this industry. There's a lot of good stuff out there to work with, and people to actually go alongside and help. So really, it's just overcoming that fear again of, what if it doesn't work, which is a real fear. But the way I look at it is, if you, and I say this to people on sales calls, because everyone says, yeah, what's the worst case scenario? And you go, cool, I'm happy to look at worst case, but if we're looking at worst case, we have to look at best case too. Otherwise, it's not a valid argument. So yeah, worst case, you try and get into sales, you kind of don't really make it, you get a bit scared and you drop out and get another career right back where you started. That's worst case, right? But best case, you're able to travel the world working from your phone, taking a couple of Zoom calls a day and making money that you've never made before, and supporting a family just on your own income, and there's no stress in the background. So it's kind of like, you can either be scared of starting because you might just end up where you are anyway, or you could go, well, I could be here, and like, is that worth at least trying? That for me would be the biggest thing. And then the only other thing I'd like to add is, with the sales side, a lot of people get caught up again in like the tactics and the concerns. And a big thing for salespeople is, this objection, I get this tossed at me. What do I say then? How do I say that? And for me personally, I obviously have built a framework around that, but a lot of that gets covered when you do the call the right way from the start. So just a really simple idea for people to take away: when you get into sales, you actually said this at the start of the call, and I'm really grateful that you did. You mentioned the way I led the sales call that we took together. And that for me is the key part of sales. A lot of people think I have to be extroverted and I have to be everyone's friend, right? And being completely honest, I'm very introverted and I have social anxiety, right? So you don't need those things anymore. You're not the secondhand car salesman that everyone worries about. What it is, when you're speaking to someone on sales call, you are leading them. You want to be seen as a bit of an authority and a bit of an expert in your field. And you're there to see if you can help. You're not there to be their best friend. And I think if you can go in with that attitude, most of the call will take care of itself, because you're not trying to just be the funny person just to get them to smile. You know, you're actually caring about people and going, right, how do I help? So I think those couple of things, if you go in with that attitude, it'll make the whole journey a lot more fun and exciting.
Yeah, that's really good. And I just want to add one thing there, because I know that the kind of sales call that we are talking about, is it just for the nurtured leads, I would say, or is it's not applicable for cold calling, right?
It's a difficult one. There's a few different ways to it. So a lot of people I speak to generally have probably seen like a YouTube ad, right? But for a lot of people, that's all they've seen. So they've seen like a 30-second YouTube ad, filled out their details, and now they're suddenly in my calendar. So they're kind of cold, not properly nurtured. If they're really nurtured, then it's obviously a lot more, not quicker sale, but a more comfortable sale, because there's no trust issues. They know who you are, and you've kind of nurtured that sequence. But the framework itself, it does work with cold traffic as well. However, there may be, so a lot of the calls I do is what we would call a one call close, right? They come on and they're buying on that call. That's the way that my industry works. For a lot of industries, you're probably going to have two, right? You're going to nurture them a little bit, maybe in a messenger sequence, like, you know, check that they are even looking for what you are selling. You know, that's a good starting point. Then you jump on a call where you do part of the framework, which would be more about problem finding. So what's the issues they're having? Why do they need to look at solving that? Is that something I can help with? Cool, I think it is. Let me go away, put something together, and then we'll jump on another call. And then you follow the same rest of my framework. So it does work, but sometimes you have to cut it and chop it depending on the leads that you've got.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that. I think that's really useful. And again, thank you so much for coming on. And can you please tell me, like, how can people contact you if they want?
Yeah. So realistically, the best way to kind of get in contact with me or the Agency Profits team as well, because that's obviously where I'm based mainly, is just if you kind of, you know, search on Facebook for Agency Profits. We've got our Facebook group on there. It's how to grow and scale a six-figure business. So if you kind of go through there, I'm in there all the time. And then Nick as well, who's the founder of it all, he's in there as well. Really good guy. So that's kind of the easiest way to go. I'm not yet all over social media. I'm not quite there yet. I've been focusing on honing my skills and then getting there, but I'm sure at some point soon people will start seeing this pink hair everywhere anyway.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'll definitely add the links to Facebook group and also the website along in the description box of this video. So thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.